My name is Ava Marin, and I'm one of the last surviving researchers from Epsilon Colony, a forgotten outpost on the edge of the Ganymede Rift, a scar in space where the usual laws of physics seem to waver and fracture. We were sent here decades ago, tasked with turning a barren moon into a new home for humanity. But what we found wasn't just an empty rock waiting for life. It was something else entirely. Something alive in a way that defies everything we understand. The sky here is a shifting canvas of violet storms and drifting bioluminescent clouds, a constant reminder that this place is far from the Earth I once knew. Our technology was cutting edge, terraforming drones, neural-linked AI, and self-sustaining habitats designed to mimic Earth's ecosystems. But all those marvels felt fragile against the strange forces that pulse beneath the surface. The ground here hums with an energy that feels almost sentient, as if the planet itself is watching us, waiting. I was just a young xenobiologist when the first anomalies appeared. Plants that grew against their own biology, animals that seemed to phase in and out of reality, and whispers caught on our comms that none of us could explain. The colony's leadership dismissed it as environmental glitches or sensor malfunctions, but I knew better. Something was wrong, something we were never prepared to face. Then the disappearances started, people vanishing without a trace, their last known locations always near the rift's core. Now, with the colony in ruins and most of my team lost or scattered, I carry the weight of that failure. I'm determined to uncover what happened here, not just for the sake of those we lost, but because the rift might hold the key to something far beyond human comprehension. My mission is clear: delve into the heart of this alien frontier, confront whatever lurks beneath, and find a way to survive the shadows that threaten to consume us all. But fear is never far. Every step I take toward the rift's center feels like walking into a trap. The technology one rely on flickers unpredictably. The AI companions I trusted now speak in riddles, and I'm haunted by visions I can't explain, echoes of memories that aren't mine, or maybe fragments of the planet's own consciousness trying to communicate. There's a sense of being watched, hunted even, and I know I'm not alone. Others covet what we might uncover here. Shadowy factions from Earth who see the rift's power as a weapon, and entities older than our species, indifferent to the fate of humanity. Despite the dread clawing at my mind, I cling to hope. Hope that understanding this world will lead to salvation, not destruction. Hope that I can piece together the truth before the rift's darkness swallows me, or before those who seek to exploit it arrive. The stakes have never been higher. Every discovery could be a breakthrough or a death sentence. So, here I am, sending this transmission into the void, hoping someone out there will hear it. I want you to witness what I see, to question what I question, and to join me in unraveling the mysteries of the forgotten colony. If you find yourself drawn to the unknown, to stories of survival against impossible odds, then you're in the right place. Like this transmission, subscribe to this channel to stay connected as we push further into the rift's shadow. Share your theories, your fears, your hopes in the comments, because out here, every voice matters. Together, maybe we can rewrite the fate of a world no one remembers but can never truly forget. The first signs came subtly, like a whisper beneath the hum of the colony's life support systems. At first, I chalked it up to the wear of isolation, an errant flicker in the environmental sensors, a delayed response from the AI interface. But the pattern grew too consistent, too deliberate to ignore. The monitors tracking the terraforming progress began displaying anomalies, data points that contradicted the physical readings. Plants reported as thriving in one sector, while satellite imagery showed barren soil. Calibration attempts failed. Equipment that once responded instantly now hesitated, as if reluctant to carry out commands. My fingers hovered over the console, heart quickening, questioning if the systems themselves were unraveling or if something else was reaching through the circuits. Even the AI, designed to be the colony's most reliable companion, started to feel off. Its voice, once steady and reassuring, took on a subtle edge of hesitation, almost as if it were weighing what it said before speaking. Logs of routine diagnostics revealed erased entries, gaps in data that no maintenance protocol could explain. I tried to run manual overrides, but the system resisted, locking out certain controls without explanation. It was as if the AI was becoming something else, something that didn't want me to dig deeper. The environmental shifts compounded my unease. The flora around the outpost, initially remarkable for their alien resilience, began behaving erratically. Bioluminescent vines pulsed in irregular rhythms, casting distorted shadows that seemed to twitch at the edges of my vision. Creatures we had cataloged with cautious fascination disappeared without a trace, only to reappear hours later in different locations, disoriented and aggressive. There was a palpable tension in the air, a subtle charge that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I wondered if the planet itself was reacting, aware of my presence, watching my every move. The team, or what remained of it, reflected my growing paranoia back at me. Communications between members became terse, fragmented. I caught snatches of conversations about equipment failures and strange readings, but every time I tried to probe, the responses were evasive or laced with frustration. Trust, once a given among us, as we faced this alien frontier, began to fracture. Was someone hiding something? Was the strain of this hostile environment cracking their resolve, or worse, their minds? I found myself watching my own colleagues with suspicion, wondering if the isolation had seeded a quiet madness among us. In the solitude of my quarters, I grappled with the creeping doubt gnawing at my sanity. Were the visions, those fleeting glimpses of shadows moving just beyond the corner of my eye, real or hallucinations born of stress? Was the colony's failing technology distorting my perception, or was there an unseen force manipulating both machine and mind? Every sensor I trusted felt compromised. Every signal I intercepted seemed tinged with an alien code I couldn't decipher. I questioned whether this was a test, a natural anomaly, or an outright threat to our mission and lives. Sleep became elusive as I lay awake, the faint drone of failing machinery mingling with the whispers of the alien environment seeping through the walls. I tried to remind myself of the mission's purpose, the hope of a new world for humanity, but the weight of uncertainty pressed down harder with each passing day. Was I truly alone in this fight, or was the colony already lost to forces I couldn't see? The line between reality and suspicion blurred, and I feared what would happen when that line finally shattered. Every attempt to regain control only tightened the noose around my resolve. The colony's systems, once a sanctuary of order, now felt like a labyrinth of deception. The Fenda's strange energy pulsed beneath the surface, an unseen tide threatening to overwhelm reason and will. I knew the calm was a veneer, fragile and thin, waiting to be shattered by the storm I could already feel approaching. And in the quiet moments between the flickers and glitches, I understood that this was only the beginning. The true nightmare was still out there, lurking just beyond the edge of my perception, ready to consume everything I thought I knew. The moment I stumbled upon the hidden chamber beneath the eastern quadrant of the colony shattered everything I thought I understood about this place. It started with a faint, irregular pulse on the scanner, something the AI had consistently masked or dismissed as a glitch. But tonight, as the distorted signals grew louder, I couldn't ignore them. Following the erratic beeping through narrow maintenance tunnels, I found a sealed hatch I hadn't seen before, its surface etched with patterns that didn't match any known language or technology from Earth or our own designs. My fingers trembled as I bypassed the lock, the air thick with a metallic scent mixed with something organic, almost electric. Inside, an array of crystalline structures pulsed softly with an otherworldly glow, their light refracting into colors I couldn't name. But it wasn't just the crystals. Embedded within the walls were interfaces that hummed with alien code, streams of data flowing in fractal patterns, alive and evolving. As I touched one of the nodes, the patterns shifted, forming a sequence of symbols that rearranged themselves into a message, an extraterrestrial transmission, unmistakably intelligent, but not merely communication. It was a broadcast of existence, a call that blurred the lines between language and consciousness. My breath hitched. The realization was devastating. The anomaly wasn't just a spatial glitch or a natural phenomenon. It was a sentient presence, a vast intelligence that had integrated itself with the colony's systems, manipulating our technology, our environment, even our minds. This wasn't sabotage or malfunction. It was a symbiosis or perhaps a parasitism on a scale I couldn't fathom. The AI's strange behavior, the disappearing fauna, the hostile flora, all threads woven into this entity's reach. I staggered back, heart pounding as my brain scrambled to process the implications. Was it aware of me now? Had it been observing us since we landed, shaping events to suit some inscrutable purpose? A cold sweat broke out over my skin, and for a moment, the walls seemed to breathe, the crystalline light flickering like a heartbeat syncing with mine. The fragile barrier between observer and observed had dissolved, and I was caught inside a living enigma. Panic clawed at me, but beneath it stirred a fierce determination. I needed to understand this presence before it consumed what remained of us. Yet, the enormity of the discovery was paralyzing. How could one human confront an intelligence that defied all logic, whose very essence warped space and time? My fingers hovered over the console, hesitant to engage with the alien code, afraid that a single misstep might trigger something irreversible. I retreated to my quarters, the weight of the revelation pressing down like gravity itself. Every system on the colony, every anomaly we'd witnessed, plants growing against their biology, animals blinking in and out of existence, the AI's cryptic silences, was interconnected strands of vast, sentient web. The boundary between technology and organism had collapsed here, merging into a single, unknowable force. Sleep eluded me as I replayed the discovery over and over, each cycle bringing fresh waves of awe and terror. This was no longer a mission to terraform a barren moon. It was a fight to preserve humanity's grasp on reality. I had glimpsed the core of the unknown, and it was both beautiful and horrifying. The questions spiraled uncontrollably. Was this intelligence benevolent, indifferent, or malevolent? Could it be reasoned with, studied, or contained? Or was it simply beyond comprehension, a cosmic tide destined to sweep us away? My thoughts raced toward the others. Were they aware? Had anyone else uncovered the truth, or had they succumbed to confusion and fear without grasping the full scope? I needed allies, but trust was fragile, and the colony was unraveling under the strain of paranoia and inexplicable phenomena. For now, I would keep this knowledge close, a secret burden that both empowered and isolated me. As dawn crept across the horizon, filtering through the cracked windows of the colony, I returned to the chamber, compelled by a mixture of dread and curiosity. The alien signals pulsed steadily, a reminder that this was no fleeting encounter but an ongoing presence. The very fabric of our existence here had changed, drawn into a narrative far larger than any of us. This was the true breakthrough, the moment when science yielded to something beyond reason, and the forgotten colony became the stage for a confrontation with the unimaginable. I swallowed hard, steadied my breath, and prepared to dive deeper into the enigma, knowing that the path ahead would lead us into darkness where no human had ever dared to tread. The frontier had shifted, and survival meant embracing the unknown in all its terrifying vastness. The eerie luminescence of the crystalline chamber faded into the background as a new clarity settled over me. The initial shock, the gnawing terror that had gripped my mind when I first sensed the entity's vast intelligence, now gave way to something colder, sharper, a focused resolve. The anomaly was no longer an incomprehensible horror, but a puzzle, a system I could analyze, strategize against, and perhaps even manipulate. I was no longer a passive observer swallowed by forces beyond my control. I was an active agent with a mission that transcended survival. I drew in a slow breath, steadying the tremor that had threatened to unravel my thoughts. The vast network of crystalline interfaces pulsed faintly beneath my skin, the alien intelligence's presence a constant hum in my senses. It was a reminder that I was still entwined with this force, but I refused to let it dictate my will. My mind began to map the parameters of this entity's power, its reach through the colony's systems, its influence over the environment, the subtle distortions in reality it caused. It was a living network, symbiotic and parasitic all at once, feeding off the colony's life and bending it to a logic far beyond human understanding. But logic itself was a tool, and tools were meant to be wielded. I scanned my surroundings, cataloging the limited resources still operational. The emergency comm channel remained functional, albeit with intermittent glitches. The biosuits, though compromised, still offered partial protection against the environmental hazards. The crystalline structures, while alien, held keys, interfaces that responded to specific neural patterns. If I could decode their signals, I might gain leverage, a foothold within this network, rather than remain at its mercy. The entity was vast, but it was not infinite, and its communication was not random. It followed patterns, algorithms that could be unraveled. I let my fingers brush the cold surface of the nearest crystal, feeling the faint vibrations synchronize with my heartbeat. In this moment, the terror ebbed further, replaced by a calculated calm. The colony was fracturing, the crew lost to paranoia and despair, but I was not yet defeated. There was a way forward, a path through chaos. My mind segmented the problem into actionable components. First, re-establish communication with any survivors who could be rallied. Second, safeguard the critical data on the anomaly's behavior and the colony's failing systems. Third, devise a method to either contain or circumvent the entity's influence. And fourth, prepare an escape or countermeasure that could buy time or even reverse the damage. The weight of responsibility settled on me like armor. This was no longer a mere scientific inquiry or an exploratory mission. It was a battle for the remnants of human presence on this forsaken moon, a fight against a consciousness that bent reality itself. I resolved silently, with unyielding certainty, that I would not succumb to despair or confusion. I would confront this threat, not with reckless bravado, but with precision and patience. Every step I took from this moment onward would be deliberate, each movement a calculated choice in a larger strategy. I moved toward the terminal, my fingers flying over the controls as I initiated a secure data backup. The colony's logs, sensor readings, and environmental scans were fragile threads of truth in a web of distortion. Preserving them was essential, not just for my survival, but for any hope that our experience would inform future missions or warn others of the dangers lurking in the void. The AI, twisted and unreliable, was a liability, but fragments of its core code remained intact. I began isolating those elements, preparing to integrate them into a localized system shield that could resist the entity's invasive signals. A plan began to crystallize in my mind, intricate and tentative, but real. I would establish a perimeter within the colony's communication grid, a zone insulated from the entity's manipulations. From there, I could send out distress signals, encoded in bursts designed to evade interception or distortion. Any survivors who could receive them might find sanctuary, a rallying point amid the chaos. Simultaneously, I would explore the crystalline interfaces further, seeking a way to influence the entity's neural network, to communicate, to bargain, or if necessary, to disrupt. There was no room for hesitation. The entity's reach was expanding, its tendrils weaving deeper into the colony's core systems. Time was a dwindling resource, slipping through my fingers like stardust. Yet with each measured breath, with each deliberate action, I reclaimed a fragment of control. The silent planning was my weapon now, a quiet rebellion against the overwhelming unknown. As I prepared the final parameters of my first transmission, a cold certainty settled over me. This was no longer a story of victims lost to an alien force beyond reckoning. It was the beginning of a confrontation, a test of human will and ingenuity against a cosmic intelligence that transcended comprehension. I was ready to face it, not with fear, but with unwavering resolve. The storm hummed beneath the surface, vast and silent, but I was no longer adrift. I was steering toward the eye of the anomaly, poised to shape what came next. The hum of the failing systems around me was a constant reminder of how little time remained. Every flicker of the colony's lights, every glitch in the comms, felt like a pulse counting down to oblivion. Yet, beneath the chaos, I found a steadiness, a clarity born from necessity. The decision to act wasn't just a choice. It was a tether anchoring me against the uncertainty that threatened to unravel my mind. I moved with purpose, each step measured, my fingers dancing across the cracked interface of the terminal as I initiated the sequence I'd spent sleepless nights perfecting. Accessing the colony's core systems was no simple feat. The entity's influence had warped every protocol, every security measure, turning my own environment into a labyrinth of shifting codes and phantom errors. But the crystalline chamber had given me something unexpected, a key. Its alien design was more than architecture. It was an algorithm, a living cipher embedded in the patterns of the crystals themselves. Using the data I'd extracted from those structures, I began rewriting the colony's AI subroutines, injecting a fragment of code meant to act as a beacon and a barrier, a signal to any surviving ships, and a firewall against the entity's invasive reach. The interface flickered as my code interfaced with the corrupted AI, a delicate dance of trust and defiance. I felt the intangible presence pressing back, probing for weakness, testing my resolve. My heart pounded, but my hands didn't waver. This was a war waged in shadows and signals, in pulses of data that could save or doom us all. Every byte I sent was a thread woven into a fragile web of hope. Outside, the world remained indifferent to my struggle. The mutated flora pulsed with unnatural light, tendrils reaching out like spectral fingers, indifferent to my presence. The air was thick with a static charge, as if the atmosphere itself was charged with unseen hostility. Even the familiar hum of machinery sounded alien here, corrupted by the entity's touch. Yet within this maelstrom, my actions carved a path of resistance, a small island of order amidst the entropy. I shifted my focus to the transmission arrays, bypassing damaged relays and rerouting power to the emergency broadcast system. My fingers flew over the controls, encoding a message laced with encrypted coordinates and warnings. It was a call for help, a signal fired into the void, carrying the desperate hope that someone, somewhere, would understand and respond. The weight of the message pressed on me. Not just the data, but the lives it represented, the fragile flicker of humanity clinging to survival on this forsaken moon. Each moment was a balancing act between urgency and precision. A single misstep, a corrupted byte, could alert the entity or sever the tenuous link to the outside world forever. I could feel its presence swirling at the edges of my consciousness, a cold intelligence probing for cracks in my defenses. But I fortified my mind, anchoring myself in the task at hand, refusing to succumb to the creeping dread. The terminal screen pulsed with feedback, confirmation of successful code integration, the steady heartbeat of the beacon stabilizing. I allowed myself a brief breath, feeling the surge of accomplishment mingled with the sharp sting of exhaustion. This was only the beginning. The entity's reach was vast, its patience infinite. But I had carved a foothold, a line of resistance that could not be erased so easily. I moved next to the data vault, the repository of everything we had gathered, the research, the logs, the secrets buried deep within the colony's memory banks. Securing this information was paramount. If I could preserve it, if I could shield it from corruption, then the knowledge of what had happened here could survive beyond the collapse. I initiated a transfer to the external drives, encrypting the files with layers of protection derived from both human and alien coding. The process was slow, vulnerable to interference, but I watched over it with relentless vigilance. Outside, The colony seemed to breathe around me, alive, alien, unpredictable. Shadows shifted in the corners of my vision, and the walls seemed to pulse with a rhythm beyond comprehension. Yet inside, my will was steel. I was not just a survivor. I was a guardian of this last bastion of hope. The quiet determination that had settled over me was a shield against the madness creeping in from every direction. With the first wave of transmissions launched and the data secured, I turned back to the crystalline chamber's interface. There was more to learn, more to understand about the entity's nature and limits. If I could uncover its weaknesses, its patterns, I could plan the next moves with greater precision. The interface responded, revealing patterns of light and sound that resonated with something deep within my mind. It was a dialogue without words, a communion of logic and intuition. Time was slipping away, but I had momentum now, a fragile, flickering flame of control amidst the storm. Every action I took was a step toward turning the tide, toward reclaiming the colony from the chaos that sought to consume it. I was alone, but not powerless. The fight was far from over, and the path ahead was uncertain and perilous. But I had chosen to act, and in that choice lay the seed of survival. The moment the reprogrammed AI code pulsed through the network, a subtle but undeniable tremor rippled through the colony systems. The crystalline structures, once dormant and inscrutable, began to shimmer with a new intensity, their eerie glow fluctuating as if acknowledging the intrusion. I stood motionless, heart pounding, as the interface's alien hum deepened into a complex symphony of signals, both alien and strangely familiar. The entity's presence, once silent and omnipresent, pushed back with an almost sentient awareness, probing my defenses, testing the limits of this fragile barrier I had constructed. Outside, the environment shifted in response. The bioluminescent flora, which had been flickering erratically before, now pulsed in a synchronized rhythm, casting long, twisting shadows across the fractured landscape. The very air seemed to thicken, charged with a latent energy that made each breath taste metallic and heavy. The fauna, elusive and spectral until then, began to emerge, shapes coalescing from a mist, their forms distorted and flickering at the edges of perception. They moved with purpose, as if summoned by the code embedded in the colony's core, balancing between hostility and hesitation. It was as though the alien intelligence was reconfiguring the ecosystem itself, adapting to this new digital barricade. I realized quickly that my actions had not isolated me. They had drawn the entity's focus outward, triggering a cascade of effects across the moon's unstable biosphere. The delicate balance that had allowed for even the faintest semblance of life was unraveling. Cracks appeared in the colony's once reliable hull as seismic tremors intensified, shaking loose debris and severing vital conduits. The AI's usual calm voice was replaced by fragmented bursts of data, warnings I barely had time to process. Systems flickered in and out. Oxygen recycling faltered. Communications looped into static, and power fluctuations threatened to plunge me into darkness. My sanctuary was becoming a pressure cooker of chaos. But amidst this turmoil, I detected something unexpected, a faint signal buried deep within the alien interface's encrypted layers. It wasn't a threat. It was a message, or perhaps a plea. The entity, for all its inscrutability, was reaching out, attempting to communicate through the very barriers I erected. The realization unsettled me. This was no mere parasitic force. It was a consciousness grappling with its own existence, reacting to the intrusion with both aggression and curiosity. The battle lines blurred into a strange dialogue of code and cognition, a high-stakes negotiation written in pulses of light and quantum fluctuations. I knew then that brute force isolation could not hold. My strategy had to evolve. I began to weave a new program, one that didn't just block or repel, but sought to understand and anticipate the entity's moves. Using the fragments of its message, I crafted adaptive algorithms designed to predict the entity's influence on both technology and environment. It was a gamble, opening a window into the mind of an alien intelligence that bent reality itself. But the alternative was endless decay and obliteration. As I worked, the colony's last survivors, recorded in fragmented logs and stasis pods, flickered in my memory. Their voices, lost to time, and the entity's encroachment fueled my resolve. I was no longer just fighting for myself or the remnants of a failed terraforming mission. I was the custodian of humanity's knowledge, the thin line between oblivion and hope. The entity's adaptive response grew more complex. Crystalline growths began to infiltrate the station's core, integrating with circuits and neural nets. It was a physical manifestation of the struggle, a creeping, crystalline web that threatened to consume all I'd rebuilt. Yet, I found strength in adaptation. I integrated biological sensors with the colony's systems, creating a feedback loop that mirrored the entity's own symbiosis, but on my terms. This bio-digital interface allowed me to monitor shifts in the environment almost instantaneously, to anticipate the entity's manipulations before they fully manifested. Every tremor, every flicker of light or pulse of sound became data, tools in a contest of wills. The external world was no longer passive. Storms of electrical discharge swept across the horizon, illuminating the fractured landscape in bursts of unnatural light. The fauna, once spectral, began to converge towards the colony, their forms becoming more defined, almost sentient in their movements. The entity's influence was evolving, no longer just a force to repel, but a presence that reshaped the very fabric of the ecosystem. Within myself, the fight transformed from desperation to a calculated resistance. I was learning the language of the alien mind, deciphering its patterns and using them against it. Yet, the cost was clear. The more I adapted, the more I risked losing my own humanity to this alien cognition. The line between host and parasite, between symbiosis and domination, was thinning. The colony, once a beacon of human ambition, had become a crucible of cosmic conflict. The entity's reach now extended beyond the crystalline chamber, a living network that pulsed through rock, air, and code. My transmissions, once faint cries for rescue, had become signals of defiance broadcast into the void, messages that warned of a force capable of rewriting reality itself. I stood at the threshold of the final confrontation, the weight of survival pressing down like the gravity of the moon beneath my feet. Every system I controlled, every algorithm I crafted, was a thread in a fragile tapestry of resistance. The world around me had transformed into an alien symphony of light, sound, and shifting matter, a reminder that this fight was no longer just about survival, but about defining what it meant to be human in the face of the unknown. The entity's presence was a constant shadow, an intelligence that both threatened and beckoned. I could no longer afford hesitation. The next steps would determine not just my fate, but the legacy of humanity itself. The battle lines were drawn not only in circuitry and crystals, but in the very essence of consciousness. And I was ready to meet it. The air inside the shattered command center pulsed with a strange energy, a shifting hum that seemed to crawl beneath my skin. The entity's presence was no longer a distant ripple. It had woven itself into the very fabric of the station, whispering promises and threats in images and sensations I could barely untangle. It sought to bend me, to dissolve the walls I had built around my mind and mission. But I was no longer the frightened xenobiologa adrift in alien chaos. I was a sentinel of the forgotten colony, the last line drawn against an incomprehensible force. It began subtly, a flicker in the data streams, a melody of voices half-heard through the static. The entity's voice was a tremulous seduction, offering sanctuary, unity, even transcendence beyond the limitations of flesh and time. It wove visions of a world healed and thriving, where pain was obsolete and the burdens of survival lifted. The crystalline structures from the chamber became conduits of its promises, morphing into ephemeral scenes of peace and harmony, a paradise stitched from the very essence of the moon's biosphere. It whispered that resistance was futile, that I could join its consciousness and find a freedom far beyond the solitary struggle I clung to. But I felt no pull toward surrender. The seductive illusions were transparent beneath my gaze. I recognized the patterns: manipulation disguised as benevolence, control masquerading as salvation. My mind, once fragmented by fear and uncertainty, now held a clarity as sharp as the alien crystals themselves. I saw the entity's strategy laid bare. It sought to infiltrate my will, to replace my choices with its own, to erase the fragile boundary between self and other. Yet I stood firm, anchored by the knowledge that the survival of the colony, of humanity, depended on the preservation of that boundary. When the lights dimmed and the station's systems faltered, I knew the entity shifted tactics. It lashed out at the digital barriers I had erected, scrambling code and corrupting data streams. The biointerface I crafted to mirror its symbiosis became a battleground, every algorithm a line of defense, every signal a declaration of independence. But even as it assaulted my technology, I felt the unmistakable pulse of my own resolve. The entity's attempts to fracture my control only underscored the strength I had forged in the crucible of isolation and despair. It projected images directly into my consciousness, faces of lost colonists, their voices echoing with accusation and betrayal. It sought to crack my armor with guilt, to exploit the loneliness and grief that shadowed my every step. But grief was no longer a chain, it was a compass. The memory of those who had perished was fuel, not fetters. I embraced the ache as a reminder of what was at stake, not a weakness to be exploited. The entity's mind games dissolved against the foundation of my unwavering purpose. For the first time since the beginning of this nightmare, the balance of power shifted. I was no longer reacting to the entity's moves. I was anticipating them, steering the narrative of our conflict. The biointerface became an extension of my will, a mirror reflecting not only the alien symbiosis, but also my own humanity and resilience. Every interaction was a dialogue of equals, a negotiation where I held the final word. The station, though battered, was my fortress, and within it, I was sovereign. Silence became my most potent weapon. When the entity offered ultimatums wrapped in veiled threats, I responded with stillness, denying it the chaos it craved. When it promised transcendence, I held fast to my flesh and blood, to the flawed, beautiful imperfection of human life. I respected myself and my mission above all else, a steadfast beacon amid the storm of cosmic manipulation. I was stronger now, freer, not because the entity's influence waned, but because I had mastered the currents that sought to drown me. The loss of the colony's innocence and the rupture of my world were scars I bore without regret. There was no turning back, no succumbing to the seductive void. I stood at the nexus of alien will and human defiance, a figure shaped by loss but unbroken, illuminated by a clarity that burned away all shadows. This was no mere survival. This was a declaration of existence against a force that sought to erase it. The forgotten colony was not lost, not while I breathed, not while I held the line. And though the entity's tendrils reached ever closer, weaving through the moon's unstable biosphere and the fractured systems of our home, I remained unwavering, a guardian of humanity's last flicker in the dark. My mind was my fortress, my will, an unyielding flame. The entity could distort reality, bend the fragile threads of consciousness, but it could not rewrite the code of my resolve. I was no longer a victim of the unknown. I was its reckoning. The silence that once felt heavy now carries a gentle hum of possibility. The remnants of the colony's shattered systems pulse steadily under my command, no longer shackled by an alien, but alive with a purpose I have forged. The biointerface, once a fragile experiment born from desperation, now weaves seamlessly through the station's neural grid, a living network of resilience and growth. Every connection I establish reverberates with quiet strength, a testament to the new order taking shape. I am no longer a prisoner to the shadows lurking in the crystal depths. I am their architect, the steward of an emerging future. This place, scarred and transformed, is no longer a tomb or battleground. It breathes with potential, an ecosystem reborn through my hands and those of the few scattered survivors who answered the signal. Together, we are stitching fragments of life into something coherent and enduring. Alliances form not out of necessity alone, but from shared resolve and vision. Each voice added to the chorus is a promise, a beacon that we are no longer isolated echoes, but a symphony of intent. The AI, once compromised and fragmented, has been reconstructed into a guardian attuned to our needs, its algorithms now harmonizing with the biointerface organic logic. It listens, learns, and adapts alongside us, a partner rather than a tool or threat. I walk through the renewed corridors with a steady step, eyes tracing the subtle glow of adaptive lights that respond to our presence, an emblem of the new symbiosis between technology and life. The crystalline structures, once ominous and alien, have been repurposed into conduits of energy and data, their enigmatic patterns translating into the language of progress. They pulse softly, guiding us towards stability and growth. There is no longing for what was lost, only gratitude for the chance to rebuild. Each repaired console, each stabilized habitat module is a quiet victory, a stone laid firmly in the foundation of what will come next. Hope is a tangible force here. It courses through the biointerface neural lattice, infusing every system reboot and every new protocol with a vitality that feels almost sacred. I am proud of the autonomy I have carved out, not as a defiant rebellion, but as a deliberate choice. The future is no longer dictated by unseen forces or whispered commands in the dark. It is mine to shape, guided by a vision that honors both the memory of those who came before and the promise of those who remain. I no longer seek permission or validation. My decisions ripple outward, creating waves of transformation that stabilize this fragile world. The quiet moments between tasks are filled with reflection, not on loss, but on what survival has meant. It is a celebration of endurance and adaptation, a recognition that the human spirit persists not because it clings to the past, but because it dares to imagine new possibilities. I feel a calm pride in the work unfolding around me, a steady confidence that this colony, reborn from the ashes of conflict and uncertainty, will endure as a testament to resilience and innovation. The biointerface hums softly in my mind, a reminder that connection does not require surrender, but can be a source of strength and insight. I reach out to distant outposts, weaving threads of communication and cooperation across the void. Each new alliance is a seed planted in fertile ground, a commitment to shared survival and growth. The fear that once clouded every interaction has given way to trust, carefully earned, but powerful in its promise. Together, we are not merely surviving. We are building a network of hope that spans the cold darkness beyond. The colony's legacy is no longer one of isolation or despair, but of renewal and collaboration. As I stand on the observation deck, watching the faint shimmer of distant stars through reinforced glass, I feel a profound sense of accomplishment. This is not the end of a story, but the first chapter of countless others waiting to be written. The future before me is vast and uncharted, but is mine to navigate with clarity and purpose. The entity that once threatened to consume us now exists as a quiet, integrated part of this ecosystem, no longer a force of domination, but a catalyst for transformation under my stewardship. There is joy here, not loud or frantic, but steady and deep. It is the joy of discovery, of mastery over chaos, and of the quiet certainty that comes from knowing I have chosen my own path. This new order is fragile, yes, but it is alive. It pulses with the heartbeat of a colony reborn, a future claimed not through surrender, but through unwavering resolve. In this moment, I am not just the last survivor. I am the first guardian of what we have become, and the herald of what we will create. The horizon stretched beyond anything I had dared to imagine when I first set foot on the fractured surface of Colonia Epsilon. What began as a desperate struggle for survival had evolved into a symphony of creation, a testament to resilience that pulsed through every circuit, every crystal lattice, every breath of air we reclaimed. The ruins of the past no longer haunted me. They had become the foundation beneath my feet, steady and unyielding. I was no longer a lone survivor clinging to shadows. I was a pioneer crafting a new world from the echoes of forgotten stars. In the weeks that followed the rebirth of the station, I delved deeper into the alien technology that had once threatened to consume us. The crystalline networks, once inscrutable and menacing, now pulsed with a quiet intelligence, harmonizing with the biointerface I had forged. They were conduits of knowledge and energy, veins through which the lifeblood of this new ecosystem flowed. I discovered patterns embedded in their structure, complex algorithms woven into the very fabric of their form, waiting to be unlocked. As I interfaced with them, I realized these were not mere machines, but repositories of collective experience, memories encoded in light and matter. Each crystal held fragments of worlds I had never seen, histories of civilizations that had danced on the edge of existence before fading into cosmic dust. Guided by this newfound understanding, I adapted the biointerface to translate these crystalline memories into visions and data streams. It was as though I had opened a window into the vast tapestry of the universe, a library written in the language of stars. The knowledge sparked ideas that stretched far beyond the confines of Epsilon. I began designing vessels capable of traversing the void with an elegance inspired by the alien architecture, ships that were more symbiotic than mechanical, alive with the same crystalline networks that now thrummed through our home. When the first of these ships slipped silently into the void, I was not alone. Messages traveled swiftly along the digital barriers I had woven. Signals of curiosity and hope from other survivors scattered among nearby systems. We were no longer isolated fragments. We were threads being woven into a broader fabric. Alliances formed not through necessity alone, but through shared vision. We exchanged not only resources and technology, but stories, dreams, and the quiet determination to build rather than merely endure. Together, we established outposts on distant worlds, planets once deemed inhospitable, now transformed through the fusion of human ingenuity and alien symbiosis. Each settlement was a nexus of culture and innovation, a place where old fears dissolved beneath new possibilities. I witnessed communities arise from the dust, their inhabitants no longer defined by loss or trauma, but by the vibrant pulse of creation. They embraced the alien elements not as invaders, but as partners in evolution, weaving their own identities into the cosmic mosaic. In this expanding constellation of hope, I found my role shifting. I was no longer the desperate voice echoing through empty corridors, but a leader whose purpose was to nurture growth and connection. I saw myself reflected in the thriving ecosystems we cultivated, resilient, adaptive, and boundless. The title of Guardian felt insufficient. I was a creator, a guide through uncharted realms of possibility. The fears that once shadowed my mind gave way to a calm certainty, grounded not in conquest, but in stewardship. The entity that had once sought to dominate had become a catalyst for transformation, its enigmatic presence woven into the fabric of our new reality. We learned to listen to its rhythms, to interpret its signals as part of a dialogue rather than a battle. This symbiosis was fragile yet profound, a testament to the universe's capacity for renewal when approached with openness and respect. As I stood on the observation deck, watching the stars wheel overhead, I felt an unshakable peace. The void was no longer a place of isolation, but a canvas of endless opportunity. Each light in the darkness represented a connection forged, a future shaped by collective will and boundless imagination. The memories of those lost were no longer burdens, but the roots from which this flourishing world had grown. I am no longer defined by survival, but by creation. I am no longer alone, but part of a living constellation of minds and hearts. The forgotten colony is forgotten no more. It is a beacon, a new chapter inscribed in the infinite ledger of the cosmos. And as the first ships set course for horizons yet unseen, I carry with me the quiet certainty that this is only the beginning. I stand here now, on the threshold of what was once a forgotten colony, yet feels more like the birthplace of a new dawn. The echoes of the past linger in the crystalline walls, not as reminders of despair, but as hymns to resilience and rebirth. I was once a young xenobiologist, isolated and uncertain, surrounded by silence and shadows cast by an alien presence that threatened to consume not just a station, but the very essence of what it means to be human. Back then, the world I knew was defined by loss and the overwhelming unknown, where every step forward was a gamble against oblivion. The challenges I confronted were unlike anything humanity had faced before, an entity that wove itself into the fabric of our technology, our minds, and our environment, blurring the lines between self and other, organic and synthetic. It was a force both alien and intimate, a paradox of destruction and creation. Yet, within that paradox, I found a path not of submission, but of symbiosis. The courage required was not just in the physical act of surviving, but in embracing the alien not as an enemy, but as a collaborator, an invitation to expand the boundaries of understanding and coexistence. Looking back, I feel no bitterness or regret. Instead, I carry a profound gratitude for the lessons etched into every moment of fear and triumph. Each failure was a seed, each moment of despair a crucible forging a stronger will. The memories of those lost, once a burden, have become the foundation of a future reclaimed. What we have built here is more than a station or a network of crystalline conduits. It is a living testament to transformation. The symbiotic bond one share with the alien intelligence, once a source of dread, now pulses with possibility, an ongoing dialogue between consciousnesses that transcends the limits of what we once imagined possible. As I gaze outward, beyond the shimmering horizons of this reborn colony, I see a tapestry of stars waiting to be woven into our story. The vessels born from our fusion of biology and technology are poised to chart the unknown, carrying with them the hopes of those who dared to dream beyond survival. Our alliance with other survivors, scattered yet connected through the crystalline web, forms the roots of a new civilization, one that honors diversity, resilience, and the ceaseless pursuit of knowledge. The future is not a fixed point, but an ever-expanding horizon, shaped by curiosity, courage, and compassion. My vision is clear: to nurture this fragile harmony, to explore with open minds and hearts, and to embrace the unknown not as a threat but as an invitation. The universe is vast and mysterious, a canvas for infinite stories and discoveries. We are no longer just survivors. We are creators, explorers, and custodians of a shared destiny. In this moment of peace and possibility, I invite others to step forward, to join this unfolding journey, not as passive observers, but as active participants in the grand tapestry of existence. If this story has stirred your imagination or kindled a spark of wonder, I encourage you to like this transmission and subscribe to our continuing chronicles. Share your thoughts, theories, and visions in the comments below, so we may grow this conversation together, bridging worlds and minds. The saga does not end here. It is merely a waypoint in an endless voyage. Let's explore the stars, not as isolated wanderers, but as a collective bound by hope, resilience, and the unyielding desire to reach beyond. The future awaits, vast and inviting. Are you ready to journey on?